Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Outlander is a fantasy historical sci-fi show tracing the adventures of Claire and Jamie Fraser, who have just returned to Scotland after difficulties and dangers trying to subvert the Jacobite cause in Paris. Episode 8, The Fox's Lair, begins back in the bonny glens and glades of the Scottish Highlands, where Claire and Jamie have returned to his family home of Lallybroch and are just enjoying potatoes and life in general with Jamie's sister and her family, when a surprise letter arrives from wee Prince Charles, saying that Jamie has pledged himself to the Prince's cause and naming him as a Jacobite supporter. Now, after all the work they've done to prevent the Prince coming across and starting the uprising, they're clearly unhappy about this, as this also means Jamie will be considered a traitor by the Crown. So he reckons he might as well throw his lot in, and then try and win the war, and he also seems to have sprouted a new haircut in this scene. Anyway, it's a shame he spent the last 7 episodes trying to undermine this very cause and making sure they didn't have enough money to support them, or, support from the French. But anyway, Jamie gives it a think, and he decides that he can't actually go off to meet Prince Charlie at Crieff until he's got some men with him, so he decides they'll head off and meet his nasty, rapey old Grandad, Lord Lovett. Now, despite this all being against what Claire's been saying since the middle of Season 1, it doesn't take very much to convince her that it's a good idea to actually support the Jacobite cause. Basically, a little bit of nookie and then the sight of big manful Jim cooing at a baby in Gaelic, and then she's quite happy to go along with the plan. When they arrive at Castle Beaufort, Lovett's home, they bump into a surprise from the past. It's only wee Colum, Jim's uncle, who's come to persuade the Lord against siding with Charles Stuart. Now, when we finally meet Lord Lovett, it turns out that he's really a right old swine, or a wily old fox, as the saying goes. And after being rude to Claire, he kicks her out. And there she bumps into wee Leary, who professes all sorts of godly penances and sorrow at having been a right royal cow in the first season. Of course, Claire's having absolutely none of it, because, she nearly got her burnt at the stake as a witch. Anyway, after dinner, Lord Lovett's being an old git as usual, and even nasty to his wee milksop son, who's all moon eyes over Leary. Jamie tries to talk war, and finds it a bit difficult with Colum making him look bad, and then causing the cause to look undermanned and underfunded, which it is in both counts. And then Lovett takes even more time to make his son look like a dozy prat when he tries to speak up, which, to be honest, he is a bit of a dozy prat. But anyway, everyone gets down to drinking and eating, and they forget about the whole war business. Jamie rightly guesses afterwards that the old fox wants something from him, because otherwise he'd have turned him down at dinner quite flatly. So he goes off and argues and insults him until the old fox laughingly reveals that what he really wants is Lallybroch. And that spurs Jamie into realising that if Lovett's son actually sides with them, the old fox will probably follow suit. But he doesn't know how to convince him in time and will make him grow a backbone. Claire, however, has an idea. She corners wee Leary and tells her to chat up Lovett Jr., then ensures that their paths cross down beside a church. And Claire nips away to let the kids get on with it, but the wee Burke starts spouting poetry and generally being a bit useless. It seems though that Leary has things well in hand. And that's when Claire bumps into Maureen Beattie inside the church, and she's some sort of mystic soothsayer seer, and the old fox uses her to see visions of the future, and she said that she's seen an ominous secret vision of him about to be beheaded for treason, but didn't want to tell him in case he decided to kill her. But before she can go any further, Leary suddenly pops back in to say that the wee daft laddie ran away from boob fright because she showed him down her top. Anyway, things finally stop going in circles when Lovett puts forward 2 documents to Jamie and Colum and says that if Jim will sign Lallybroch over to him, he'll give him the support and troops he wants. Otherwise, he's going to stay neutral and make a pact with Colum saying that he won't get involved. Jamie's all about to sign right on the line when Claire does a big swoony Salem's Lot turn and then prophesises that same secret vision that Maureen Beattie told her earlier, but she amends it to make it sound like it's more pro-Jacobite. Anyway, the old fox gets so railed up he's just about to go all stabby at Claire when his wee lad finally grows a backbone and stops him, pledging himself to the Hanoverian cause. But Lovett just humphs and then signs the pact with Colum anyway, and Jamie and Claire think that they're headed off empty-handed, with only a quick word of goodbye to Colum and a wee thank you to Leary before they go. Anyway, at the edge of Lovett Land, they're surprised by a sudden turn-up of a load of Highlanders on the hill, and it turns out that the old fox wasn't bothered at all by his son's belligerence, because in fact, that nets him a win on both sides of the fence, and he's now covered regardless of the outcome of the war. So with a smirk and nod, they all troop off to Crieff with their newly gathered warriors to meet up with the rest of the Jacobites and the start of the rebellion proper. So what did I think? Well, this episode obviously marks not only the halfway point in the series, but also the point in where our heroes have returned back to Scotland from France. So it's natural that a change of pace is not only what was needed, but what was going to happen at this point in the show. And in that way, The Old Fox is kind of a return to the older style of Season 1, with a lot of wee scenes, a lot of discussions, and a little bit of things going round in circles. Now, it was lovely to see Lallybroch, to see Jenny and Ian and Colin and even wee Leary again. You know, it was great to see the actors turn up again and do the little part. And it was nice to see the characters come back. It gives that little bit of universe consistency. And it was also a refreshing change to see some return to the old ways, even if it only lasted a short while before the turmoil started causing major ruckus again. And it was great to have the amazing Clive Russell turn up as Lovett. I mean, he's a well-kent face to UK audiences, and US folk might know him from things like Game of Thrones and movies like The 13th Warrior. But he was clearly having lots of fun being a horrible, dislikable old git and threatening to have Claire raped and then smacking about Maureen Beatty when he wasn't gulping down whiskey and like coughing on people. Also, major kudos for the Zulu homage at the end when all the warriors lined up on the hill. Yeah, totally love that. Great movie. It totally reminded me of it. But for me, most of this week really wasn't that amazing. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't great. It was fun, but this channel isn't called Grumpy Onions for nothing. Oh wait, no, this channel's called Grumpy Opinions. Silly me. Anyway, I'll be blunt. This week, I felt it was both rushed and a little slow at times. Some of the scenes felt a bit bitter, and the drama felt a wee bit flimsy, and some of it seemed a little bit unimportant, while at the same time it was too serious to be played for proper laughs, which it could have been. I mean, starting at the beginning, I liked the fact that they were back in Scotland, but I felt like they'd skipped over a lot to get there. Although it's quite clear that things like the arrival back from Paris and meeting Ian and Jenny and getting everything back into the swing of things, that would have been far too big to have actually taken up time with. I mean, that would have been a massive chunk of the episode. And even if it was just sort of a how do you do kind of thing, we kind of cut into the middle of the first scene and it was like, oh, here we are, suddenly back. And oh, look, we've grown potatoes. We must have been back a wee while now, probably a couple of months. And then there was that awful acting by the old serving woman. And oh, look, there's a letter. And everything's suddenly gone to hell because suddenly Jamie's a wanted man again, which of course happened so many times in the first season that it just got ridiculous. But immediately it's like, no, you can only have 5 minutes of peace and then everything's got to be back to major hell and strife and terribleness and plot events. But anyway, also, after having dealt with an evil comp to mad shag about Prince, smallpox outbreaks, murders, intrigues, poisonings, and evil gangs of rapey bad guys, which we never actually got a final point to, that all just stopped. I mean, maybe that was more to that in the book, that also annoys me, but what was the whole point about the guy with the birthmark on his hand and everything? I mean, unless that's going to pop up in like series 12 or something like that, it seems a bit ridiculous that suddenly all these evil French gangs have just been completely forgotten about. But anyway, it's all this new minor dispute over a couple of men and ownership deeds to Lallybroch. It felt kind of parochial. I mean, it really did. It didn't feel that important. And there's also a feeling that this episode kept going round in circles, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, we had two almost identical scenes of Leary and Claire chatting, where only one would have been enough. I mean, considering the first one was fine, it was the meeting again, but then the second one, half of that scene was repeating things that they said in the first scene. And then you had several meetings of Jamie, Colin and Lovett all having talk and going round in circles, especially the two scenes of Jamie and Lovett having a chat. Both seemed very similar, and they were getting nowhere fast. I'm not griping at the actors. I mean, what they were doing is quite interesting, but it wasn't very engaging. And Jamie didn't seem to take the threats to Claire all that seriously, which seemed bizarre. And then Lovett being totally shocked by a bottle of whiskey being thrown in a fire, which, you know, I mean, maybe that was his favourite single malt or something, and he was sad about it. But I just felt that that whole scene didn't quite work for me. It just felt a little bit too much like having something for the sake of something happening. And essentially, you could say that there's a bit too much fat and gristle around the edge of this episode that's been dying to trimmed off so you could have squeezed something more interesting in. I mean, if you've got really, really long scenes of Leary chatting up the daft, bookish Lovett boy, and that's the highlight of the episode, but then you, at the same time, the scenes with Claire and the seer felt so utterly shortchanged and cut down, and it just meant the pacing of the whole thing felt kind of all over the place. It also felt a bit strange that they've been trying to crowbar Leary into the episode, because I read somewhere online that she actually isn't even in this part of the book. So it seemed like they were doing that just to make sure that they weren't shortchanging the actress, and so that they could have her on screen. But it also seemed a bit weird, and it threw up a massive problem, for me anyway, because at the end of the episode, Jamie said he had to go and thank her, but he didn't understand why. And yet, earlier in the scene, just before Claire went and talked to Leary to convince her to help about the Lovett boy, she ended with that comment of going, I think I have an idea, and it suddenly cut away, and then to the scene of Leary like sniffing Jamie's shirt like the creepy weirdo that she is. But does that mean that Claire just clammed up after she said that to Jamie in the first place? I mean, that's a total TV way to do things, to cut from somebody saying something implied to the actual resolution of that implication. But at the end, it made it seem like she never actually told him what she was going to do, or afterwards had told him what she'd tried to do and failed. I mean, surely he must have known. That's the whole point, is that Claire and Jamie tell each other things. Otherwise, it just came off as kind of odd. But beyond that, this really felt like what I would class as a deep breath of an episode, and compared to all the pomp and excitement of France and the upcoming battles, which are clearly hinted at in the newly updated and super Scottified opening credits, which, the song's back in English again, that's always going to feel like a slow episode, when you're looking at these two different, like, fast beginning and fast later point in the series. We're right bang in the middle here, in the middle of the dip. Now, I can only hope the next week's going to get a bit more involved, a bit more interesting, because I was frankly a wee bit bored by this week a few times. But just a last point before I go. I noticed that this week I've now got over 60 subscribers, and the last two episodes both had over 1,000 views on them. Now, to a wee guy like me who's just got a little channel, that means the world to me. So I'm so grateful for all of you, and I just wanted to thank everyone who's watching, and hoping that you're having as much fun watching these videos as I have making them. And if at any point you ever want to just chat about things, feel free to leave a comment here, or you can find me on my Twitter. The Twitter thing will pop up at the end, so please don't be shy. Anyway, thanks again. I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.